back to our seventh episode, which I said last time. Today we have a very special guest, a big name in the natural bodybuilding community, who's brought hundreds of athletes on stage, first times experienced. Uh, Herself is a WNBF Bikini Pro, and we have very, very special guest today, Krysten. So thank you for joining us. It's such an honor to have you here. So for all those listeners, which I don't think there's many who don't know who you are, could you just give us a brief introduction about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, I just wanted to thank you both for having me on. I'm really excited to have a chat with you both today. So, as Adrian said, I'm Krysten Janzen. I am a WNBF Bikini Pro, and I've been a online fitness coach for the last over 10 years now. In 2014, I started my business. So I've been focused primarily on lifestyle clients, and then as my goals evolved, my coaching skill sets have evolved as well, where I still work primarily with the general population, but as well to specialize in bodybuilding. I am what do they call it again? I can't remember what it's called, Brandon, the certification that we have,
The postnatal thing?
no, I was going to say even just the prep and bodybuilding coach certification
Oh,
through.
the PBC one?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Got that a couple years ago, and as well too, specialized in a strength and conditioning. So, yeah, been doing quite a bit for a while, but yeah.
Wow, excellent. So that's a very big resume you have there. So with all, everything that's going on, we have next season, Brandon and myself, we're going through prep. Um, so, we're not going to talk about that today. Okay, we want to talk about you. You do have, quite some, interesting news, and through social media, you have launched a new page. What does that tell us?
Absolutely. So, what Adrian's referring to is the fact that I am pregnant. I am officially 16 weeks and change, but I have been a pre and postnatal certified coach for 3 years now. I've been working with prenatal and postpartum moms for over 5 years, and they probably actually are my favorite clientele to work with. But I've always had the dream since I got my certification to create a app, a subscription to help those individuals going through that journey, just because your training does change quite a bit. But I didn't always feel completely right about it until I went through it myself. Even with having the certification and now going through it with myself, you can definitely see some of the things that you don't see in a certification whatsoever. So having that experience has been very helpful and beneficial. And yeah, so I've created a page. It's called the Strong Mamas app, where I'm going to be documenting not only my journey throughout this, but as well to providing evidence-based advice, because there is, as we know in the fitness industry, so much conflicting information out there, and there's still such a negative stigma when it comes to women and lifting weights while pregnant. So my goal with that page is, of course, to try to help mitigate and eliminate some of that noise.
Yeah, I
That's
totally
awesome.
agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
I was going to actually compare it to competing as well because
Ah,
I feel like a lot of people when they like might be trying to prep people, but they never actually went through a contest prep themselves. And it's kind of the same thing with pregnancy, right? Or like if you haven't actually went through it yourself, it's hard to actually see those things that aren't really taught and actually resonate really well with your clients. So I love how you kind of waited till now to you're experiencing those symptoms and now you can really resonate with them. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Very, very similar to the bodybuilding space when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's awesome. What would you say some of like the symptoms that you had that you've kind of started to feel that you weren't really taught about, or maybe like you didn't really, yeah, get any information about before?
Yeah, for sure. I think The biggest change that I have noticed is just the differences in my breathing technique and my core training. So even when I would compete in powerlifting and even just lifting heavy and trying to prioritize the Valsalva maneuver, for example, I thought I was breathing correctly. But even now, understanding it a little bit more in depth, I'm like, oh, okay, I really wasn't breathing as efficiently as I was prior to that. And just even having those breathing techniques during and postpartum is so extremely important. We can kind of get into that a little bit later, but that and then the core training. So a lot of women are told to either stop training core altogether or modify things. And even with trying to understand, okay, why do we have to modify things, and not really fully having that understanding of it has made a huge difference with just going through it firsthand.
That makes a lot of sense. That was actually one of my questions that I had for you, is just the bracing aspect with being pregnant, and like how to go about doing that in a way that's going to be effective and not potentially like harmful for if you are pregnant. So like maybe we could jump into that right now if that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'll start off by saying this. The biggest thing with pregnancy is you always have to do what you feel comfortable with. So I would always lead with that. For a lot of individuals who do feel comfortable with their experience with strength training, maybe CrossFit, for myself, bodybuilding and calisthenics, if you feel comfortable with it, you're totally fine to continue to train that way. So in regards to strength training, if you are used to bracing by using the Valsalva maneuver method, there's actually some new research that's showing that it's actually completely safe. Now, prior to this research, even in my certification, I was taught, and a lot of other individuals are too, that you shouldn't actually be utilizing this method just because of the increased intra-abdominal pressure. It can increase your heart rate, and you don't want to do that. But there's new research, like I said, where it's actually totally safe if you feel comfortable with it. For those who don't know, the Valsalva maneuvers, when you're just holding your breath under a heavy load, that's just for a couple of seconds. It's not like you're holding your breath for extended periods of time. So even with the study that I'm referring to here, and I can send it over to you guys if you want to include it in the show notes, there was conclusions that a lot of the participants, and I think it was over 700 participants, so not too bad. It showcased that their postpartum symptoms actually were mitigated. So they had less postpartum symptoms and reproductive symptoms that a lot of women experience when they stick to the style of training that they were used to all the way up until labor. And that's in comparison to individuals who completely stopped training altogether. But again, like I said, it does come down to what you feel comfortable with. There are certain individuals who experience complications in their third trimester and they have to be put on bed rest. So, of course, in those types of situations, there's not much you can do. You got to listen to your doctor. But if you're totally fine, you're totally safe, and you feel comfortable with it, lifting heavy and utilizing the Valsalva maneuver, if you feel comfortable with it, is totally safe.
Yeah, that's actually it's just a side question. So I know there are individuals who may run into a good dilemma. Doctors telling you one thing, but then you're feeling another. Uh, so in this scenario, how would you maneuver your way around this?
Yeah, and of course that's a tough one, right? Because of course, like even for myself, for specific clients I have, if I tell them to do something and their doctor tells them something else, of course I'll always recommend for them to listen to their doctor first and foremost. But depending on the circumstances here, like I know some doctors still, unfortunately, but not many, they'll tell you to stop lifting as soon as you're pregnant. And it's unfortunate that some individuals do that, but even myself, I'm lucky enough that my doctor's like, nope, just keep doing what you're doing, keep lifting. It's good for you. If we experience any complications, then we'll have a different discussion. But, I think it'll be situation dependent as to how you want to kind of approach that.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. So probably all in all, probably would recommend listening to the doctor as your first priority.
I'm probably trying to find a doctor that has a bit more education on the subject would probably be a good thing too, because I know some of those walk-in doctors, sometimes they give you very broad and it almost seems like old style like news or like recommendations. So like trying to find a doctor that's more up to date with the research and specializes in that would probably be a good thing. Hey?
Absolutely. And like if you don't feel right about the recommendation from your doctor, it never hurts to get a second opinion.
When it comes to somebody that is, say, they just got pregnant, but they're wanting to work on their fitness, like they haven't really trained before, what would you say or what would you recommend for somebody like that that's gotten pregnant, but they're actually still wanting to improve their health, make sure that they're nice and healthy, that their baby's healthy and stuff like that? Like, what kind of training tips would you recommend? Would you recommend them doing some of these compound movements, or would you ease them into it? What would that kind of look like?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing there is it's never too late to start. I think a lot of individuals think like, well, I've never lifted weights or I've never exercised before, what's the point now? But like I said previously, it can help tremendously with the postpartum recovery. So I think that it is probably the best approach to ease into things, working their way up eventually to the compound movements if they can. But if they feel more comfortable with machine work and more isolated work, that's totally okay. If all they feel comfortable with is doing some yoga, Pilates, and walking for the time being, that's totally okay too. The biggest thing is just movement in general. So a progressive approach, I think, is always best for individuals who are just starting out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When it comes to, I know a lot of girls get like morning sickness, and that might be able to affect their ability to consume food or maybe get enough protein or enough nutrients in their diet. What would you say, or is there any tips that you have for individuals dealing with that and trying to strength train and trying to still fuel themselves enough for it?
Absolutely. Well, I am blessed that my first trimester was very mild. I didn't actually experience any nausea or any morning sickness, just a lot of fatigue and weird cravings. So I'm very blessed that way. But of course, I've worked with other individuals who've been on the opposite end of the spectrum and just really struggle with it. And of course, I think the first thing that I would suggest is if you are somebody who tracks their calories and their macronutrients quite rigidly, like myself, to be okay with stepping away from that for a while. If we have specific calorie and protein goals that we have in mind and we're dealing with, morning sickness and aversions where we can't eat what we typically want to eat, it can add even more stress where we're not hitting those targets. So I would say, be okay with stepping away from that for a while. It's going to be okay. And, just listening to your body. I know that that is very open-ended and that's not always easy to do. But something that I have found to be helpful for a lot of my clients is having some bland snacks available for yourself and having just small, frequent snacks and smaller meals throughout the day. Even if you don't feel like eating, even just having a piece of toast, if it doesn't upset you, have that piece of toast. Just having more food in your stomach, it actually can help with reducing that nausea, even if you don't always feel like eating. So that even just having that understanding, I think, can help with creating that incentive to still try to eat a bit.
What would your suggestion on how to manage cravings, or would you ask them to manage them at all instead of just maybe just eat whatever your body feels like? Like, what would that turn into?
For sure. Yeah. I think, of course, we want to make sure that we are managing them strategically. Like, I wouldn't restrict yourself from the items that you are craving. But, when I say strategically, but what I mean by that is like maybe prior to indulging in the item that you're wanting, having some sort of protein source prior to that and or drinking some water prior to that. So that way we can kind of reduce that risk of really going overboard, because even just having more protein, as we know, in our system and more water in our system, that hunger tends to go down a little bit. So if we want like an entire pint of ice cream, maybe we'll only have half the pint if we have some protein in our stomach. So I say like go for it. Like don't be afraid to indulge in those things, but we want to manage it where we're not overindulging.
When it comes to the calorie intake too, like when you're pregnant, I remember taking some nutrition classes that are very broad on pregnancy back in like university, and I think there's a certain level of calorie intake, or like you need a certain amount more than usual. Do you know like or have like a rough estimate on how much more you need, and is it like trimester dependent?
For sure. Yeah, it is going to be trimester dependent. So during the first trimester, you actually don't need any additional calories. Having said that, though, most women are under eating. So if you're eating 1,500 calories, you're in a deficit prior to getting pregnant, I would bring that up to your estimated maintenance calories. But if you're already eating at your maintenance calories, you don't need to go above and beyond that during the first trimester. When you get into the second trimester, and we don't want to get too hung up on the numbers here, just because like your hunger does fluctuate quite significantly. One day you may be completely famished, and the other day you're not hungry at all. And that's where, just tracking loosely or not tracking at all, depending on what you feel comfortable with, is probably a good idea throughout your pregnancy journey. But throughout the second trimester, that's when you want to try to increase your calories by around 300 to 400 calories and keep that steady increase in the third trimester where it's up around maybe an additional 500 calories. So maybe another meal, like another big meal in your calorie allotment during the second and third trimester.
Nice, nice. That makes sense. I guess they're probably growing a lot quicker in the second and third trimester.
I was gonna just ask, have you experienced with any individuals who's experienced very serious swelling of the joints?
Yes, a little bit. And typically that can just be due to dehydration for a lot of individuals. I found that with my experience, that has helped quite a bit, but we tend to see it a lot in our wrists and as well as our ankles. So it can be a little bit frustrating where you might need to scale back your intensity and just really listen to your body and give it additional rest and sleep too.
Makes sense. I was gonna ask with the intensity of training too, like should you still be training to like failure like as the trimesters go on, or is there any time where it's probably a good idea to pull back, or what is your thoughts and perspective on that?
Absolutely. I think for the majority of people, and even myself included, we tend to want to scale things back during the first trimester. And that's just because the symptoms just feel pretty dramatic and significant. And you're most vulnerable at losing the baby during that time where, just trying to get used to all of these changes, all these new symptoms, and all the changes in your training, and even just the fatigue that you're trying to manage, where reducing that intensity in the first trimester is probably the norm for most people. Then we tend to see an increase in our energy during the second trimester where you're feeling good again, your energy is back, you're eating more food, and you tend to see an increase in that intensity with your training, which is totally fine, totally safe, and depending on your comfortability level, you can absolutely carry that intensity over in the third trimester, where you always want to try to be achieving progressive overload with your training. Like there's some individuals that I follow who were like squatting 225 pounds for 3 reps on Labor Day. Like I don't train like that, but she had a really successful recovery season from it. And it's pretty safe for a lot of individuals. Again, just kind of depending on your situation. If you're cleared to lift like that, you have no complications, it's totally fine to see that increased intensity all the way up until baby arrives.
That makes sense. Like I do see on social media a lot of like especially like fitness influencers training when they're pregnant, and like the recoveries they bounce back so much quicker, and it doesn't seem like they've had many problems. So it makes sense that you can still push it. And there like I wonder if there's some sort of benefit too with like Valsalva maneuver, like if it's blood pressure is going up and it's adding a little bit more stress to the baby, but maybe that's a good adaptation for that baby if they're undergoing a little bit of stress. So yeah.
You're absolutely right, because if you think about it, like with the type of breathing you want to do, it's like the diaphragmatic breathing that connects to your pelvic floor. So having a strong pelvic floor is super beneficial during the delivery process, right? It's actually a very similar sensation when you're pushing. So having that strength prior to that, it just does increase your pelvic floor strength so that you can have a good delivery in theory. And then, that recovery afterwards, you do tend to bounce back a little bit better from that. So you're absolutely right with those positive adaptations.
Sweet. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
To bring it to like post pregnancy, like, is there any specific tips that you have maybe for after somebody's delivered the baby and like the recovery process? Yeah, maybe if you could go into that a bit.
For sure. Yeah, that's where, of course, we're going to be extremely vulnerable. And it is going to depend on the type of delivery that you have. If you have a vaginal delivery, then you can start to typically lift and move a lot quicker. Whereas if you have a C-section, then the recovery process is going to be a lot longer. So it depends, of course, when you are cleared for exercise. You tend to have a checkup with your doctor 6 weeks postpartum, and that's when, if things are looking good, you tend to get cleared. Having said that, though, just because you're told the first 6 weeks not to exercise, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that you can't do. By even just doing some light walking, like I wouldn't push the stroller up a hill or anything like that. Get your partner to do that, but even just some light walking can increase that blood flow so it can speed up the recovery process. And then as well too, doing some deep core breathing techniques in the first, like as soon as you get home, can really help with just recreating that connection with your pelvic floor and your diaphragm so you can, get that core strength back again.
Makes sense. Yeah, Adrian, do you have another question there?
I did, and then she answered it, so no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's maybe talk about bodybuilding a bit. Like, do you plan on returning back to the stage maybe the next 5 years? Are you still is that on your mind at all?
Never say never with competing. I imagine you two can attest to this. There are so many experiences and times where you're like, I'm done with competing. And then you go to a show and it's like, I want to compete again, right? Like there's always that desire to get back on stage. So I won't officially say that I'm hanging up the heels forever, but as of right now, there's no plans in my head where it's on the horizon, where I have a timeline with it. But I always will still train like a bodybuilder. Like I always still have that intention of, okay, can I grow my shoulders a little bit more? Can I grow my glutes a little bit more? What can I do to just bring a better package if for whatever reason I do end up deciding to compete again? But as of right now, I really just enjoy the process of promoting the shows and as well just helping my athletes get to stage.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because I see so many people, they're like, oh, I'm done with bodybuilding. Like even my past coach, like Jeff Alberts, like I remember there's a point in his life where he's like, oh, I'm done with this. He felt like burnt out. And then he's still been competing like so much now. So I feel like we always, yeah, usually end up getting drawn back to it. Um,
100%.
and then I know you're doing a lot of like calisthenics training as well. I know you mentioned even with the pregnancy before we started recording this that you were still implementing some of that, but just making some modifications there. What kind of modifications have you been making for that?
For sure. So I'm still very new to calisthenics. I've been training this way for almost 2 years now, which sounds like a long time, but for anybody who's ever implemented calisthenics, you know that it's like watching paint dry, just like natural bodybuilding is. Developing the skills that you want when it comes to mastering certain movements take a long time. So I still consider myself a beginner where a lot of the things that I was training for prior to pregnancy, I've really had to scale back. So, for example, the first modification would be the muscle up. So, prior to getting pregnant, you can do a straight bar muscle up or a ring muscle up. When I got pregnant, I just had a mental block in my head because when you do a muscle up across the bar, your stomach is going over top of the bar. And and then you push yourself up. So I was just like, oh, I'm gonna hurt the baby. I don't feel comfortable doing this movement anymore. So I adapted it where I'm now practicing ring muscle ups, which is a whole other beast of its own. It's very challenging on the rings, but it's nice to still kind of try to maintain the skill sets and the movement patterns with that. So it's been going well. It's something I still am able to do. It does require a lot of core strength though with the pull up and then you push down. So I do suspect that I'll have to say goodbye to them probably in the near future. So I'm just kind of enjoying doing those for as long as possible. The next modification has been, well, not quite as of yet, but it will be soon, is the pistol squat. So with the pistol squat, when you come down your knee of the planted leg, the knee flexion, it kind of digs into your stomach. So you can't reach that full range of motion. So I do suspect I'll have to say goodbye to those soon. And then the last one is handstands. Surprisingly, the balance for handstands have been pretty good. I haven't noticed any issues as of yet, but if I notice that my balance is off or anything, I'll just use the wall or, try to do those again for as long as possible. But I think the last modification is I have scaled it back tremendously, and I am going to be prioritizing more bodybuilding for the remainder of my pregnancy. Mostly like the posterior chain. And the reason is because, of course, when you gain more weight in your stomach, your posture ends up changing, and a lot of women experience a lot of back pain, a lot of sciatica and things like that. So having like a strong back, strong glutes and hamstrings can kind of help offset that. So kind of switching gears to make that more of the goal now going forward.
Yeah, no, that's a great insight to the training with pregnancy. Like, I never really thought about like, yeah, the balancing and like, yeah,
Yeah.
having more weight in certain areas, like especially with the handstand. Yeah, there's gonna be a point where you'd probably have to be bent so far
Yeah,
backwards, and
exactly.
no, but no, that's very cool. Another question I had too is, I know a lot of girls go through a pregnancy and then they think, oh, I won't be able to compete after due to loose skin or whatever like that. Have you worked with a couple female competitors that have had kids that still do really good at shows?
Absolutely. I have three bikini pros who all have had kids.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, they've all had kids. They've all gotten their pro cards after having kids. And yeah, I think that kind of speaks for itself, right? Like some individuals, their skin tightens back up over time. Some individuals, they still have that loose skin. But I think if you have like the physique and the overall presentation, the loose skin, like the WNBF really doesn't take that into consideration if your overall presentation is on point.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I figured a couple of your athletes did have some kids too. So, and like I just wanted to say that because I see that comment so many times where, oh, like I'm gonna have kids, I'm not gonna be able to compete again because of it. And it's like, no, like I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people on the stage, like, especially like the masters and stuff like that have multiple kids and they're still crushing it, right? So
Yeah, and see, now you say that, and it's like, oh, okay, now I want to compete again just to prove those comments wrong.
yeah, 100%, 100%. Maybe talk a bit about or the WNBF Kelowna show, like that's coming up in, I guess, May. Is it May
17th,
21st? I
yeah.
keep getting the or May 17th. May 17th.
17th.
May 17th, yeah. So my husband and I are the promoters for the WNBF Kelowna Natural Show. We've been promoting it since 2020. So we are 7 weeks out, which is crazy to think about already from our next season here, but it should be a really good show. So I'm really looking forward to it.
That's awesome.
Same
Yeah.
location.
Yes, so yeah, they'll say it's gonna be at the same location, the same host hotel. Everyone always treats us so well with those vendors, so we'll definitely keep things the same. So nice and easy.
That's awesome.
Perfect. And Adrian and I will be at that show too.
Yes,
So yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we're not the best people to ask about the pregnancy stuff because we'll never be able to experience it. So that's why we need somebody like you who is also experiencing uh, the entire process to share your current thoughts on it and what to expect moving forward. And I think it gave us a really good insight to all future potential competitors or individuals who are also experiencing the same process as you, to not lose any just give up lifting at itself. But I think you make a very good point that I wanted to bring back is for individuals who may potentially have not experienced lifting before and may not want to struggle through the last phase of Labor Day, things and exercises to really strengthen and helping them. I do believe a lot of doctors right now are promoting exercising are going to be good for you and it will help recovery as well as during Labor Day. So some of these exercises I think are really, really useful. And I think you would get really good insights for these individuals as well. Not really a question, it's just a statement.
No, I totally agree. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Brandon?
No, just yeah, thanks again for coming on, and I learned a lot from this podcast too. So like, it's very cool to see the insights of it, and how yeah, it's a really positive thing to continue to strength train. And I still feel like there's that stigma out there where a lot of people are like, oh no, I'm just gonna stop when I'm pregnant. When it's like you were mentioning, there's so many benefits that come along with continuing to do it.
I agree. Me too. I've learned a lot. It's so different from what you see from books and articles as well. I think also just like bodybuilding or even strength training in exercise science, it's constantly evolving and there's constantly new news. Even there's some news that you just told me just now, which I learned so much. Um, so we really appreciate sharing all these insights with us, and we appreciate your time. So to finalize all the information that you've given us, where can we actually find all these information and all of your app and everything like that?
Absolutely. My website's probably is probably the best bet there. So it's just the nattyhour.com. Easy peasy.
We will link everything down at the description below to all Kristen's links. So if you have any information or any concerns, definitely reach out to her. She's very, very knowledgeable. She knows a lot of stuff. She really knows her stuff. So yeah, believe her. And yeah, so if that causes it, then we'll pretty much wrap this up. So thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time.